It is said that to err is human and to forgive is divine, but I'm not so sure about that. Forgiveness is a complicated topic. Many people find it to be extremely difficult to forgive. It's not so hard when it's for a perceived minor infraction, but for those bigger, more painful issues, it can become a massive obstacle. The problem is usually rooted in what we believe forgiveness is. First, let me tell you what it is not. We think it means what you did to me is okay, but that is not what it means at all. And it's not an emotion. It's not something that just suddenly washes over you and miraculously vanishes. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a decision. It means I'm just not willing to carry the pain of this anymore. Chewing on painful incidents is rather like picking up a baseball bat and smacking yourself with it on a regular basis. Something hurts you one time, and then you choose to relive it and to feel the pain over and over again. So it's no longer the other person who's hurting you. You're doing it to yourself just as surely as you picked up the phone, rang that person and said, "Hey, you know that thing you did that hurt me so much? Would you please do it again 17 times a day for the rest of my life?" As long as you refuse to let go of the grudge and forgive, you are also refusing to let go of the pain. It becomes masochistic and pointless. Sometimes we don't want to forgive because we feel a need to punish the person who hurt us. The bottom line is, in every moment that you choose not to forgive, you're accomplishing nothing. The only one who's being punished is you. Let's say someone's hurt you, and whether it was yesterday or 10 years ago, he's no longer in your life. He's long gone. And here you are, still remembering this nasty thing he did. You're raking it up and you're remembering how much it hurt. You're wondering, how dare he? Do your thoughts about this affect him? Is he being punished? Is your grudge making him sorry or sorrier than he already is? Is it going to change history and wipe out what he did? And what if he apologized, but you're still chewing on this old pain? What if he had said, "I'm really, really sorry. I know I hurt you and it was so awful of me," but you still can't, that is, won't forget, and you cling to your anger and you refuse to forgive? What more can he do or say? And what can you really expect? Is an apology going to make a time machine appear and you can suddenly just go back and the painful incident is undone in some way? All of us have messed up and wished and hoped that we would be forgiven. Think of a time when you wanted forgiveness and you were met with a cold, angry look or complete rejection. How did that feel? Of course you wish you could undo the thing that hurt, but you cannot. The only thing left is to acknowledge where you went wrong. After all, you're only human. You've got certain skills and tools in any particular moment, but sometimes they're not enough and you make mistakes, right? Well, it's the same with everyone else. Even if what they've done is vile, horrible, deliberate, and cruel, they're still functioning the best they can in that moment based on their experiences, their learning, and their tools at the time. Sometimes we lash out in the nastiest ways possible, and unfortunately, it's often at those we love most. This is not an excuse, it's just an explanation. And if we're capable of doing it, we must accept that others are too. No double standards allowed. Consider the karmic consequences for not forgiving. That universal system of balancing energy. It's like Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You throw a ball at a wall and it will come back right at you. It's the same with energy. What you put out, you will get back eventually. So therefore, when you have an unforgiving heart, you will also find yourself on the receiving end of it at some point. We're all here to learn lessons. We're all teachers. We're all students. And when we're hurt, we can choose to look at the situation and learn lessons from it. What can we do differently to avoid being hurt in the same way somewhere down the road? Can we be more assertive, less aggressive, more patient, perhaps non-judgmental? We can always choose to feel hurt or not. For example, if someone insults you and attacks your character, you can do one of three things. You can feel like a victim. How could he think that of me? Or you can be neutral and understand it's his opinion and his words really mean nothing. An opinion is not a fact, after all. It's merely someone else's belief. And if you view another's harsh words in this way and you choose not to place any importance on that view, there's no need to feel hurt and therefore nothing to forgive. Or the third view is, if there's truth in those words, be grateful for the opportunity to see something about yourself that you might want to change. The bottom line of all of that is that we cannot ever hurt someone, and therefore, we cannot push buttons either. There is no such thing as pushing someone's buttons. Those people have only learned that if they do this, you react like that. So if you don't want to react like that, teach them something new. They can keep trying and trying. They can keep doing the same old behavior, but you respond a different way, that's up to you. And before long, they give up because they see that they can't get the same response. We hear about forgiving and forgetting, but sometimes the forgetting can be harder than the forgiving, especially if we're expected to forgive and forget the same sort of behavior over and over again. We become resentful. We don't believe the apologies. We put up walls. We wait for the next time the same thing happens again. And if it happens to you, you might start to feel like a doormat. Are you going to continue to accept the unacceptable? Well, no. You don't have to. You can still forgive it, but you don't have to forget it. Forgiveness can be the key that unlocks the door to a peaceful, joyful, and harmonious life. It is a fabulous pain reliever, bringing with it release and relief, lightness, and love. But without learning lessons from difficult incidents, it can also be the key to falling into a trap that takes you right back to a place that needs to be left behind. For example, listening to the words of an abuser. He promises he'll never hit you again. He begs forgiveness. He promises he'll get treatment. You give the forgiveness, he breaks the promises, and the abuse continues and escalates. Forgiving does not mean you have to forget, nor does it mean you have to go back for more. Sometimes we can be afraid to forgive because it's allowed us to forget, and we put ourselves back in toxic situations. So when I say it's important to forgive but not forget, I'm not suggesting that you should carry a grudge either. I'm saying that forgiveness allows you to let go of the pain, but if you've learned a lesson, that is the part you must not forget. Refusing to forgive keeps us earthbound. It keeps us tied to our humanness, our ego, and keeps us separated from our spirituality. Learning to let go of anger, indignation, our pain, and outrage allows us to lift ourselves and to rise above those, thereby allowing us to function from the level of our spirits and not from ego. It may be one of the most difficult things we do, but this only makes it one of the most worthwhile, allowing us to learn some of the greatest and most valuable lessons. When we stay in an unforgiving and angry place, sometimes we can be driven to do things that are worthy of needing forgiveness. We may say terrible things, judgmental things, vindictive and angry things because we feel justified. We decide that those other people deserve every bit of it after what they did to us. But really, we've only reduced ourselves to the same level of inappropriate behavior that we witnessed in them, yet we don't always see this. It really becomes a story of pots calling kettles very black. It's easy to see how closely tied together forgiveness and judgment are. Two sides of the same coin, really, or perhaps like yin and yang, each contains the seed of the other within it. Once we recognize that we've also been guilty of inappropriate actions, we've got two troublesome situations on our hands. We've got person A to forgive, and now we've got to forgive ourselves as well, and this is often the place where we have the most difficulty. We can beat ourselves up better than anyone else, often adding a good dose of shame to the mix. We don't feel worthy of forgiveness, so even when it's given by others, we don't believe we're deserving of it, and we continue to berate ourselves. Forgiveness is also tied to the idea that we're all divinely perfect beings on the inside, and when we're hurt by someone, we should look past the offending behavior, knowing that this is just the wounded ego acting out and needing healing. We should remember that behind the behavior lies a pure and perfect spirit. If that's true for ourselves, it's true for everyone else, and we must remember this in those moments of pain and anger so we don't lash out. Ironically, the closer the relationship is to us, the more difficult it can be to see past that behavior. You'd think the more we love others, the easier it would be to look past their hurtful words or actions that are directed at us, but it doesn't actually work that way. If anything, it's worse. It's helpful to consider that in these incidents, these people are being mirrors for us. They're showing us something in ourselves that we need to heal or to change or improve. Those people are providing opportunities for us to learn, just as we're doing for them. But once again, judgment is our enemy. Ironically, it's easy to judge most harshly those whom we love most. If we judge others' behavior as inappropriate, disrespectful, or hurtful in some way, it's based on our own opinions of right and wrong. We create these problems in our own minds, turning these situations into incidents that are about wrongdoing and forgiveness. But if we see the actions of others as opportunities to learn and not as attacks on us, forgiveness becomes effortless and, in fact, unnecessary or irrelevant, a moot point. Think of the pain we would be saving ourselves if we could just take this approach to what we would have previously seen as hurtful behavior. Therefore, it is your perspective that determines the need for forgiveness. It's your perspective that changes everything, not just in this, but in all situations. Since we know we can control our perceptions and the judgments we make, at least in terms of having the power and ability to change them, then this should make a difference in terms of how we view issues that we see as requiring forgiveness. When I first began digging into the subject some years ago, I came up with some rather startling revelations. Every time I thought about the words, "I forgive you," I envisioned someone in a white robe and a huge tall hat looking rather like the Pope. I saw him as superior, condescending, above reproach, looking down on some poor sinner and granting forgiveness whilst peering down his holier-than-thou nose. I felt powerful judgment, not about whether the action was right or wrong, but as an attack on the person's character. If one person seeks forgiveness and another is meant to grant it, an unspoken agreement has been reached that says what person A did to person B was wrong, which is a judgment. And person B can feel superior to person A, which is another judgment. With so much judgment involved, it seems to me that forgiveness is also very arrogant. It says, I have the right to decide if you're sorry enough. Or perhaps even worse, I have the right to decide that you should be sorry. Well, what if there's no right and no wrong, just two opposing views? I'm sure many a war has been started, at least in homes, if not between countries, when two sides feel wronged and each wants an apology from the other, yet neither is in the mood to offer one and neither wants to forgive. Personally, I don't think that's necessary for spiritual growth. Perhaps it's a human need, a need of the ego, nothing whatsoever to do with spirituality at all. Perhaps there's too much judgment and too much arrogance tied up in it to even allow it to have anything to do with spirituality or divinity. I think the notion of forgiveness should be replaced by the idea of seeking to understand the perspectives and intentions on both sides. And if the people involved are truly spiritually oriented, they should be able to just have a conversation about the incident. If they view it analytically, they can see the lessons learned. They can talk about why they felt the way they did or what they need to heal. They can discuss how they can help each other as a result of the incident. The best situation is when both sides know that no apology is necessary, and if that applies, then forgiveness is simply not required either. All cultures function on basic laws or rules, whether in a city or in a jungle tribe. There will always be a set of rules or societal laws by which every member of that group is expected to live. When those laws or rules are broken, there needs to be accountability. We begin learning this as small children when the first group we encounter is family, and later the larger group is society. We know that there are consequences when someone breaks a rule. There's judgment against that person, and there needs to be an apology or some form of restitution. Often an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a show of remorse will minimize the sentence or consequence, whether in a legal matter or a personal one. Interestingly, there's no rule about forgiveness required, certainly not in legal situations, and it's only expected or perhaps hoped for in personal ones. But it's not part of the system in the same way as judgment and punishment. To be honest, I don't much like the concept of forgiveness at all. I think it should be replaced by the idea of letting go. For example, leave this right here where it dropped. Walk away. I can't change it. I'm not going to let it attach itself to my leg and make me drag it around while it gnaws on my flesh. And perhaps someday it will be forgotten, which is better than letting it remind you of how miserable it was the first time around and then reliving the experience over and over again. I think it's much better to just let it go. And if it comes back to you, kick it in the head and tell it to take a long walk up a short pier. I like this much better than saying, I forgive you. The problem with this is that it isn't always easy for us to do in practical terms, because not everyone will share this view. For example, if you don't need to be forgiven in order to have learned from a situation and move on, the fact that you're not forgiven isn't going to affect you. But if the other person is clinging to a grudge, to anger, to blame, or to you hurt me, it will always be in the way and it will affect every one of your interactions with that person. There's a lot of power in forgiveness. It can be used as a weapon when we don't forgive someone for a transgression, whether real, imagined, or distorted. And again, perspective and judgment come into play. Imagine upsetting an angry control freak with a serious need to be right. He or she would be an unbeatable foe and an impossible person to appease. There's great humility in understanding that we've said or done something that we regret. Whether or not it creates the need for an apology or forgiveness is irrelevant. Humility and an acknowledgement of our less than desirable behavior can remind us to forgive at times when it is difficult to do, or if we reject the idea of forgiveness as being anything other than arrogant, judgmental, and unnecessary, then we can at least let go of the pain we feel over the actions of others. In such situations, this is the only way we will ever find peace.